In the grand halls of Canadian institutions, where flags of both maple leaf and monarchy fluttered side by side, King Charles III stood at the podium poised, composed, and every bit the sovereign the world expects him to be. His speech was, by all accounts, dignified, carefully crafted, a blend of diplomacy and warmth. He spoke of Canada's strength and diversity, of its deep historical ties to the Crown, and of the journey toward reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. He expressed hope. He honored tradition. And yet, one thing lingered in the air like a shadow behind the throne. There was no mention of his younger son. Not even the softest echo of Prince Harry's name. Not a trace of acknowledgement, subtle or otherwise, of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. This was Canada, after all. The very place where Harry and Meghan had first sought peace. Where they had hoped to begin a life away from the royal goldfish bowl. For a brief time in early 2020, it was their sanctuary. A quiet stretch of coastline on Vancouver Island, far from the tabloid chaos and the weight of titles. It was here, among pine trees and ocean mist, that the royal couple envisioned a new kind of life. Still connected to the Commonwealth, still rooted in service, but on their own terms. And now, over 4 years later, the king had returned to Canadian soil, without them. There were no photos in the crowd of Harry's past appearances. No flashes of Meghan's visit to Toronto during her early relationship with the prince. No whispered references. Nothing. Just silence. And in that silence, the public was left to fill the gaps. Some believed it was a strategic omission, a quiet affirmation that the monarchy was focused on those who stayed, not those who walked away. Others viewed it as an opportunity missed. A brief, golden moment to show compassion, perhaps even a hint of reconciliation. But the king's words, though rich with diplomacy, were careful to avoid the personal. And perhaps that, in itself, was the message. After all, this was a king who had spent much of his life balancing royal duty with private disappointment. A father who once walked behind his ex-wife's coffin in front of millions, now bearing the weight of a fractured family in the age of global scrutiny. In recent months, his relationship with Harry has remained distant. While Charles extended olive branches in the past, an invitation to the coronation, quiet gestures behind the scenes, they have largely gone unanswered, or at least unresolved. When Harry briefly visited the UK earlier this year, following his father's cancer diagnosis, the two reportedly did not spend more than a half hour together. And so, during this landmark speech, the king's focus remained firmly outward. On diplomacy. On unity. On Canada. There were warm mentions of Queen Camilla. Subtle nods to Prince William, the heir, the future. But not a syllable spared for the son once called the spare. In royal circles, everything is deliberate. The clothes worn. The words said. And the names left unspoken. Some say it's a wound that hasn't yet healed. Others wonder if the silence is a protective measure shielding the crown from the storms that still swirl around the Sussex name. And yet, somewhere across the Atlantic, in California, the family that once stood beside the king continues to live a very different life, far from palaces and protocol. Raising children. Building careers. Writing their own version of history. Whether that story will one day include a reunion remains unknown. But in Canada, on that quiet podium, under the crisp northern sky, the message from the king was clear. The past may be part of the family. But the future of the monarchy? That's being written, without you-know-who. But while King Charles moved gracefully from one engagement to another, visiting military memorials, Indigenous leaders, and environmental foundations, the absence of Harry's name lingered like a quiet pause in conversation. It wasn't just a missing line. It was a deliberate silence. A silence that echoed louder with every handshake, every smile for the cameras, every polished paragraph of royal rhetoric. For many, the speech symbolized a subtle but unmistakable shift in royal tone. This was not the language of a father trying to bring his son home. This was the voice of a monarch choosing to move forward, with or without him. The crown, after all, is not a place for uncertainty. Its strength lies in continuity. And in recent years, the Sussexes have come to represent the opposite of that. And yet, even in that silence, the emotional undercurrent remains. Because beneath the robes and duties, Charles is still a father. One who once cradled Harry in his arms after the loss of Diana. One who has seen both sons become men, one stepping closer to the throne, the other walking away from it. Now, they live in different worlds. One shaped by royal protocol. The other, by freedom and the cost that comes with it. It's tempting to imagine a day when that distance will shrink. When olive branches will be more than headlines. When silence will no longer be the most powerful statement. But for now, the message from Canada is clear. The King is speaking to the world. And who he doesn't mention says just as much as who he does.